right, good afternoon. Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session, Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. It's 1:05 p.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. We have a full slate of commissioners here next to me. Commissioner Fournier, Mejia, Edwards, and Klaus, County Manager and Assistant County Managers, Leonard Hernandez, and Robin Campbell and Rob Gelder. Public virtual attendance available on the Thurston County YouTube channel. We're here with three elected official meeting segments to a 2-hour work session. Superior Court will be up first, then Prosecuting Attorney, and finally the Sheriff's Office, roughly 40 minutes each. And we're starting off with Judge Skinder, presiding judge of Superior Court. And I guess I'll start to turn it over to Judge. Anything you'd like to take up, present, issues to discuss, and then commissioners may have questions as well, but kick it to you first.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm sorry, I just came out of another meeting on efforts to go through forms. We're trying to update some of the forms that are used. Specifically, we just had a long meeting about updating our conditions of release form, which is used in every case. And so I'm still thinking through some of the things we talked about there. But what I would tell you for the purpose of this meeting, we're in a situation right now where we are extremely busy. There is a lot going on in both our family juvenile court facility and our main campus building. The benefit that I think the county gets is with our group of judges right now, we are maximizing our ability to get as many trials heard as we can. We have, as you know, trials in the criminal realm, civil cases, family law, Involuntary Treatment Act, unlawful detainer, guardianship. There is a lot that's going on. And every week, there is a full slate of cases that what I'm trying to do is work with our operations manager to maximize as many cases as we can get out in all these different areas of law, because we know when we are able to do that, it gives sort of an end to the road for the practitioners in any particular practice area, that they know if they can't reach a resolution on their case, that there is a reasonable likelihood it's going to go to trial. The amount of work that is funneling into the Superior Court is huge. And the breadth of that work in terms of the different practice areas is very large. And so we are still really trying to address that need. And what we are seeing in every practice area is by being able to get to these trials so people know that there is a reasonable chance their case will go to trial, it's causing the rest of the system to work well. And by that I mean cases are resolving, other calendars around those types of cases are filling up and they're being used in the right way. So what it feels like to me is there is that period of time where, especially during COVID, we were not operating at max efficiency. We are operating at max efficiency now. And so the difficulty that causes is it highlights the need we have for more courtrooms, more judges. The amount of work is greater than we can address everything. And so every week I'm trying to go through and prioritize, when I get a list of cases in all these different practice areas, which cases need and have the highest need for the community by law, by whatever the individual facts and circumstances of that case are, so I can get as many cases out and I can prioritize them. And it's pretty awesome, but it's a lot of work. And I just want to tell you all, and I want to be able to answer questions if you have it about the work of the court, because I think a lot of times it's very easy for everyone to say, well, we're busy. And you might have questions about what that looks like on a day-to-day aspect. I know Commissioner Mejia has a lot of experience with the way the court works. I know Commissioner Mentor, Commissioner Edwards. I think all of you have touched on different areas, but I think it's one thing to say there's a lot of work going on, but if you have questions about how the court operates so you can better explain that when you get questions from constituents, I'm happy to be here to really be able to answer your questions if you have questions.
Commissioner Mejia.
I don't have questions about how it operates, but just going back to the trials, Judge Skinder, I'm wondering how many trials are you hearing per week? And just, of course, not anything specific, but how does that compare to previous years? Are you hearing as many cases as previously? Like, let's say May of 2023 compared to May of 2024, it's around the same? Is it more?
I don't have, one of the things we're doing right now is we're going to be interviewing Wednesday and Thursday for a program manager position, which is a position that we have vacant. That's the type of thing that we're hoping that we're going to be able to get some more stats on those types of questions. My perspective is it is more than we were doing last year, and it's definitely more than we were doing the year before. So any given week, this particular week, we've had one multiple week criminal trial that's been going on. We had another criminal trial. We had a civil trial. We had a guardianship trial. And then I think we had another, a child relocation trial. So, we have 5 trial judges on any particular week. We have 2 criminal judges that handle criminal hearings. Then we have 2 judges assigned at the family and juvenile court. So I cannot give you a statistical answer right now. I can just tell you anecdotally, I think we have seen an uptick.
Can I follow? Is this just a boom before the summer month, right? Usually, the time before summer, right, as attorneys are going on summer vacation, there's more of that push to get trials done. Is that kind of following the same trend as you've seen it in previous years, or do you think this trend is going to be different this year and it's going to be the same throughout?
Yeah, it's always hard to predict, and that because you're right. I mean, a lot of times the attorneys are going to take time off, and then that's going to cause a dip. It feels like even when that's happening and we're having some cases go off because of attorneys not being available because they're on vacation or in training, it feels like we are able to schedule things deep enough that even with those cases that go off, that we're able to put another case in. So we'll see. I mean, usually you're right. There are some just natural movement throughout the year where things will go off. Like, for example, our family and juvenile court has been needing to have additional trial capacity. And they've had certain weeks and that work obviously is very time sensitive because it has huge impact on individual children and families. But this coming week, for the next week, they actually had no cases they needed main campus to hear. And that's been the first time that's been the case in probably a couple months. So it's a little bit hard to see, and we're so focused on, this week, next week, and the following, that sometimes having that perspective overall. But hopefully we will get some of that downtime so we can work on some of the other things we need to work on.
Can I ask one more question? And my next question is in regards to state civil cases. And I know we discussed previously before the tracking of those cases, especially during ballot processing time. And so I'm wondering kind of what's the timeline of those, and is there any plans this year to kind of start tracking those, or is it, is the court just, at this point very busy, especially with staffing changes, that they're going to wait until next year? Kind of what's the timeline for those? So
Kristen and I have been keeping that front and center on our radar. We I don't know if we have an actual date and time, but I know Kristen's been talking with Chris Stanley at Administrative Office of the Courts about that project. And she told me the other day that he is anxious to meet, and I think maybe my schedule has been tough to make that work. But our plan is to meet with him. The difficulty with that type of a study is it is staff intensive on not only the court but on the clerk's office, and our clerk's office is, I think, really they are working hard, and there have been challenges for them with staffing with that, quite frankly, I have to take some responsibility for, because we've hired some of their employees away, which has caused them to have to spend time hiring and retraining. It's our benefit for the court to get employees with that experience and keep them in county. But I think right now, there are no immediate plans to do that study, but I want to meet with Chris and discuss whether that would be helpful, because Administrative Office of the Courts, I just had a briefing with the Chief Justice, not this past Friday, the Friday before, and Chris was talking about some of the state budgetary issues. And so I want to be able to sit down and talk with him about what we could do, how AOC can help us with trying to make sure that those impacts are correctly captured for the benefit of the county.
It might be worth for the new commissioners and county managers. So this is there's a little bit of history on this issue. Because we're the county seat or the state capital, certain types of lawsuits must be filed in Thurston County. And because of that extra burden, we were getting what we call judicial impact fees, or a special amount of fee. About 6 years ago, the state took it away when they were in their tough budget times. And we've then had to fight to get it back. And part of that fight was having the courts do some inventorying of time so that we could actually try to put a specific dollar amount. And that was very successful, and it was like our #1 legislative priority for a couple, 3 years, and our lobbyists made it front and center, and we got those impact fees back. But as Commissioner he is talking about, we've talked about not wanting that to ever happen again. We're sort of trying to think proactively, and do we need to be kind of updating that study or continuing to track that time? So if the legislature ever tried to grab that money, we'd be able to go, this is the real cost to Thurston County of what we do as the courts of the state capital.
And even with the amount that they're giving us, they're not really compensating us fully for the amount of work. And Judge Skinder mentioned it. It was a huge burden on the courts and the clerk's office to track this time. There was a lot of training that went into it. And so it is a very intensive period of time to track all of these cases. But just with the transitions that we're seeing in the legislature, with a lot of new legislators coming in, and that education piece missing, and going back into that tight budgetary time, I really do want us to be proactive and be sure that I don't want them to take it away and then us be kind of in a scramble to try to make that that study work in a time where it's already tight. So
plus there's an opportunity to increase our ask if we can actually demonstrate that the impact is not being fully captured. Yeah. So there's both. And
just so you know the magnitude, it's approximately $1.2 million a year.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, pretty important. Yeah. It's important.
So it's not something that is off our radar. It's just trying to do it in a way that it is productive, and we're continuing to have those discussions with the Administrative Office of the Courts, who have been a good partner to us in that regard. And so I guess that's the best way I can answer that for right now.
How did we manage that loss when that happened?
We did a few things
to
bridge the gap, but we immediately set to work on this study so that we could demonstrate to the state that the money was,
was there an attempt necessary to recoup the costs over the years?
We did. We were convincing, with the help of our lobbyist, to get backdated, if you will. We got reimbursed for the year that they didn't pay. And then they set it up going forward, and it's a proviso in the governor's budget. But the court has to ask for it and have it there. And I would say, while I understand it's a huge lift, it's better to be able to plan ahead to when we're going to do it than to have the legislature yank the money and us having to scramble
Yeah.
to get it done.
Okay, good. Other questions? Judge, you and I spoke on Monday, and we spent the whole hour talking about the renovation project, and I also had wanted to ask you about APPR.
Yes.
Ran out of time then, so I'll ask you now, kind of how it's going. Is it helping work? Is it changed? What's your feeling about it, and how it's being implemented at this, we've had a few months or closer to a year. I don't know. Can't remember exactly how long. October. 6 months, 7 or 8 months?
Yes. So I think it has been a success, but it's a process. There's a process of education as well, and that's the thing. The pretrial is one of those areas of law that, for people that are working in the court system, it is something that people are very familiar with. I think when you talk about a lot of the concepts of what pretrial is, I think even stakeholders that are very involved in the system, it has been a helpful process to go through. We've been spending years really going through our processes in the county, working with law enforcement, working with prosecution, working with defense, and also educating the community. I took part in a media summit recently with media were invited throughout the state. Our Office of Public Defense, our prosecutor's office also took part in that. Pierce County took part, Skagit County took part. And it was a half-day symposium really to benefit the media to understand what pretrial is, how it's handled in our state, and to just have a critical analysis of that. Where I think it's been helpful is we've gone away from a system that was very subjective to one that there's a data-driven public safety assessment, that we are looking at hard data that has statistical relevance to certain factors that we can look at when we're trying to make decisions about whether someone's going to commit an offense or not come back to court, and how to try, and this has sort of been the mantra of the project, how to maximize community safety, but also maximize release. And so those efforts, I think, have been significant. One of the things when I get to talk to people around the state is I'm really proud of our pretrial services department, and I think you should be too. I think you are. They do excellent work, and we are really fortunate in our county to have a pretrial services, which is thanks to the work that you all have done. That pretrial services is helpful because they're able to do a lot of work around this really important area. Judge Raquelme, she finished being the president of the Superior Court Judges Board. She's a judge up in Skagit County, and they don't have a pretrial services. So in her jurisdiction, when they're making these pretrial release conditions, there is no one that's monitoring whether there is compliance or not. And so I think we're fortunate in our county that we have this. And I think the efforts that we've made through the APPR process have strengthened the entire system. And I think we are making better data-driven results and decisions. Those reports that are given to the judges are helpful. And they're just a tool. Each individual judge is having to make the best decision they can based upon the circumstances that are presented in the law. But the tool of the public safety assessment has been helpful. And we are in the process now, and it's one of the things Carrie Hennon's very excited about, is being able to get Thurston County data, not only data that applies on a broader context, but actually looking at data from cases here in Thurston County so we can continue to, as necessary, adjust the public safety assessment in terms of what services we provide to different people based upon the level of supervision that they score out into. So are there specific things about that process that anyone is interested in? Because I'm happy to answer.
I'm just kind of curious at a kind of anecdotal level, like, have you had cases where, you were like, gee, I might not have released this person, but it looks like based on, it's new information I'm getting, I will, or the vice versa. I might have released this person, but now I'm kind of being told that there are some risk factors that has anything kind of, or has everything kind of dropped in line with your prior practice? I'm just sort of curious about that.
Yeah, I think where, to give sort of an anecdotal type situation, there are occasions where you might get someone who is a person that, again, the presumption is in our state, everyone is released. And the court has to make several discrete decisions. If the court releases that person, should there be conditions of release? And then if there should be conditions of release, what should they be? So I think sometimes where you had an individual that maybe had very limited criminal violations in their background. So they come in on a preliminary appearance, they have not yet been charged with a crime, but the court finds probable cause. And that person has not been in trouble before. That person, I think, both pre-PSA and post-PSA would be released without having to post a monetary bail, but with conditions. That condition, those conditions could include pretrial services. They could include a host of other conditions that might be geographical prohibitions or prohibitions about who they can contact. Could be conditions about law-abiding behavior, coming to court, not leaving the state, not having any weapons. But where I think you might see a difference is if that person struggled and let's say they did not, let's say they missed a court date and they come back into the system. I think it might have been systemically that pre-PSA that the prosecution might have said, you know what, this person, Your Honor, couldn't follow your conditions of release, so we're going to ask that conditions be increased to include a monetary bail. And I don't think that is happening like that anymore. I think our prosecutor's office, when they're making their recommendations, they're looking at the specific circumstances. And right now, as you all know, in our criminal justice system, we are facing a real struggle with a high percentage of people that are involved, that are court involved, that have mental health diagnoses. And so I think our prosecutor's office now is not looking towards necessarily asking the court to increase a monetary bail, but to look at other ways to try to get that person to be in compliance. And so they're looking at, and this is where public defense has been very helpful as well, is coming up with plans to try to make sure if that person is struggling, there's no allegation they've committed a new offense, but they're struggling with their ability to come to court, which sometimes can be a combination based on them having limited financial means and maybe dealing with a significant mental health issue. They're trying to come up with an additional condition that does not involve a monetary condition. And I think that is really what, again, what the court is trying to do is, where appropriate, try to craft a set of conditions where this person, when they have not been found guilty of a charge, and again, for a prelim, for a first appearance, they haven't even been charged with a crime. We're trying to make sure that what our state constitution says is followed, that that person is released. But we're trying to come up with a set of conditions that allow them to be successful in the way we're counting success, which is come to court, don't commit any crimes while you're on conditions of release. So I think what we're seeing is more flexibility and willingness from all stakeholders when they're asking the court to do something. They're looking at other things other than monetary bail. And I think that is a process that has been going on now for some time. But I think the work that's been done by all the stakeholders around APPR and around what we have in terms of our pretrial services has enabled that to move forward in a way that I think is helpful.
Cool, thank you, Judge. Anything else for Judge Skinner? We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Can I give a plug for a minute?
You bet.
Drug court graduation tomorrow. Another thing to be really proud of. We have 6 people graduating tomorrow at 2:30. I asked for invitations to be sent to everyone, so I'm hoping you all got those. You're welcome to come in person. We're going to be in the big courtroom downstairs if you want to come in person. We will also be on Zoom if you want to do that. But just to highlight, Thurston County was, I think it's either the second or the third drug court in the state of Washington. I think our first graduation was in 1998. We now have 858 graduates, which is pretty impressive. And so the 6 people tomorrow, for those of you that haven't attended before, they will all give speeches about how their life has changed and where they're at and what their future is going to look like. It is extremely powerful. And we really try, just so you know about timing wise, we try to get these things done in an hour because we know your time is valuable. But if you get the opportunity, please tune in and be able to hear from our 6 graduates tomorrow. I promise you it'll be inspirational.
Thank you, Judge. We have a new employee orientation at 2, but if we can, you might be a little late, but it seems like we could at least catch a good chunk of what you've got going.
You are welcome to come in at any time and stay for as long as you can. That'd be awesome.
Commissioner Evans.
I gotta say, I got an insurance commission meeting tomorrow, so I'm already out of the loop.
Got it.
All right.
Thank you, Judge.
You bet. Anything else I can address? If there is, I'm happy to, I appreciate you taking me first. But if there's something else you want to know, please let me know. And if you don't want to do it here and you want to call me, that's great too. Whatever works.
Hey, Judge, I was here for the first graduation in '98, so I've been there all along.
I know that. I mean, here's the thing. We have this great support in our county for ways of being innovative and doing things different and better. And I'll just tell you, it's really appreciated. We're looking at ways. We just had a group of our incoming therapeutic court judges and prosecution and defense and treatment team just came back from the national conference where I want to say they had 12,000 people in attendance. And they're bringing back fresh ideas so we can keep innovating, keep doing things in a really good way. And anyways, I thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Have a good day.
All right. Prosecuting attorney. Okay. John Tunon. Welcome.
Thank you. Come on up, Chrissy.
Not gonna do this all by yourself.
I need somebody to give me cover. All right, well, today my plan was to give you just a little bit of an update, kind of a snapshot in terms of what's going on in our shop. I was gonna focus today primarily on the criminal side of the house, since I talked at some length about the civil side of the house last time I was here. And I'm hoping to do this the same way the court did, to kind of give you a quick kind of flyover in terms of what's going on, some of the leading issues that we're dealing with, and then I'd love to open it up for a question and answer conversation, for whatever time allows. So, as of today, we have so far filed about 471 felony cases. Year to date, we have about 752 open felony cases in Superior Court right now. Most of those are set for trial. And most of them probably set for trial within the next 90 to 120 days. Our average caseload right now, as of this moment, for a felony deputy is 51, but that fluctuates. So I have deputies who are handling more complex caseloads like special victims, a little bit lower. General felony caseloads, a little bit higher. So it fluctuates anywhere between, say, 45 and 65, give or take. And that's the caseload for each deputy is fluctuating because cases are resolving and getting filed every day by each deputy. So it's when you take a very quick snapshot, it just tells you something about what's happened right now. We have filed 1,324 misdemeanor cases this year. Our average caseload for a misdemeanor deputy right now is 330 open cases, and we have about 13. Oh, wait, I mixed my numbers up. We filed 1,375 cases. We've got about 1,324 open pending cases. Again, most of which are either set for trial or waiting for a trial date. Our COVID backlog right now is about 1,242, and those are felony cases. So those are felony referrals that have yet to be screened and either charged or declined. That's a little bit good news, bad news, right? Because 1,200 sounds like a lot, but it's down from over 18 when we were in COVID. So we've been trying to whittle away at that backlog as best we could, even with the personnel shortages that we've been going through over the last year and a half. At one point last year, I was down, I had 11 open prosecutor positions in the criminal division out of 28 deputies in the criminal division. So we were down over a third of our deputies. We're now back to the point where we have 3 vacancies. 2 of those, however, are currently being held open for interns who are taking the bar exam and upon bar passage would automatically be hired. They've already been through the hiring process, vetted and all that. It's just they have a conditional offer based on their passing the bar. So knock on wood, they passed the bar. And I have 1 opening that we are still recruiting for. We're going to be onboarding 2 new lawyers in addition to that this month. So we're kind of slowly climbing our way back in terms of our recruiting and staffing. I will say that one of our more effective strategies, I think, in recruiting, and I talked about this as something we were going to start doing last year when I was talking about how difficult it was to recruit new lawyers, new prosecutors in particular, is we were going to really start trying to leverage our internship program. Every year we have anywhere from 6 to 10, sometimes even a little bit more than that, maybe a dozen during the summertime when it peaks out. Interns working in our office, undergraduate and law school interns. So last year we created a path that I referred to where somebody who's graduated from law school is coming out, is about ready to take the bar, can apply for one of our positions. We go through the process, we vet them, and in fact, if they are somebody that we're interested in bringing on board, we give them a provisional offer for a position. And what that does then is it locks them in, and they don't tend to go off and start applying in other places. At least that's my take on it. And we've been able to hire, counting these 2 that are taking the bar, I think it's 5 of our interns. Six. Okay, 6 of our interns using that way. The challenge for us now is, again, it's a little bit kind of good news, bad news. I have a very young team right now in the criminal division. We've turned over a fair amount of our experience. I have a handful of senior deputies who are all highly skilled and, you know, have that base of experience. And now we've got a whole kind of class, if you will, of relatively new deputies. And then deputies who were hired during COVID when we weren't doing trials, who are now actually starting to do trials. So we've also had to really focus ourselves a lot on training, internal training and external training, to try to get these young lawyers up to speed in terms of their skills. The positive side of it is that I love the energy they're bringing to the office, right? It's the kind of new, enthusiastic lawyers right out of law school, ready to practice law, wanting to know what it's all about and learn. They're hungry to learn, and they're just all very bright and lots of energy. So the future looks very good there. And right now, we're just really focusing on that training. In fact, Christy's taken that on as one of her primary priorities right now, is to try to really figure out how to get these folks trained up. Our biggest need right now continues to be the software, the Justice Premier software that I talked about for the digital evidence, the body cam evidence. If I'm hearing right, there's a contract that's getting ready that is, somebody's gonna try to get in front of you like as soon as possible. My very humble request is, please let that happen, because my staff, their back actually broke about 6 months ago. We're just like trudging along, trying to get this afloat. But what's happened is the defense bar now, including our public defender's office, instead of waiting for the discovery through our shop, is now doing public records requests directly to the law enforcement agencies as a way to get their discovery, because we can't process it fast enough to get it to them. And the secondary impact of that then is that the public records workload on the law enforcement staff, the sheriff might corroborate this, has increased. There's a big chunk of public records work that's going on, I know in the sheriff's office, presumably in the other agencies as well, that's just defense lawyers that are requesting discovery through the Public Records Act instead of waiting for us to get it processed. The light at the end of the tunnel is if we can get that software up and running and implemented, then it helps us manage all of our digital evidence, not just the body cams, but everything that's digital. We manage within that system, and it becomes just a pass. We can be able to just basically pass it right on down to defense, and hopefully that will cut down the number of public records requests that defense is making directly to law enforcement. I also wanted to update you all on our dashboard projects. I don't know if you all are aware of this. I know that at least 3 of you are, because we've been working on this for a while. About 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, we received a federal grant, a Department of Justice Smart Prosecution grant, to create a data dashboard for all of our data, so that we can actually not only look at it internally, but display it externally on our website, and allow the public to actually see what's going on in our shop from a data perspective. We're working with an organization called Measures for Justice, which is a national nonprofit organization that does this work for prosecutors across the country. We are at a point now where we're looking at being able to open it up. I think the goal is next February, it will go live with limited data, and the full data set will be up and running by early next fall, if my memory is correct. But the reality is the benefit of the project for us is it's really helped us better focus on what data should we be keeping, right? How do we track it? What does that data tell us? And so we've made a lot of upgrades or improvements to our case management system, our e-prosecutor system, in terms of data management. So now we're starting to keep more and more and more data that'll be available for this dashboard, which is why I can at least throw some numbers at you today like I did that give you a snapshot of what's going on. And then I think the last thing I'm just gonna mention is, I'll follow up a little bit on the APPR project. That's, the prosecutor's office is a partner in that project. You know, APPR really is, part of it is about the implementation of the PSA, the public safety, tool, assessment tool. And the idea that that will help bring a little bit of consistency to pretrial release decisions, I think it has. But Commissioner, to kind of respond to the question that you were asking the court, in some ways I look at it and it makes me feel good in the sense that we were actually looking at a lot of the right things before, but the tool kind of helps corroborate that, right? So there's some things that are different, but the tool looks at the same kinds of things that we were looking at before: criminal history, and you know, prior failure to appears, and you know, the things that we were looking at before. But what it does now is quantify that, so a lawyer looking at it actually has a kind of a numerical value that they can attach to it, that then they can consider in terms of what recommendation they make. But there is still room to make lots of individual observations about cases, about, you know, the particular facts of a case, or something that's going on with this particular individual that we either feel justifies maybe a higher bail or a lower bail, depending on what that is. I do actually think that APPR is one of the reasons why our jail is not full right now. I'm actually a little bit surprised. Once the booking restrictions were lifted, we were far enough through COVID that the sheriff was comfortable doing that and did that. I was bracing myself to have a full jail by the end of maybe last year, given what the jail population was pre-COVID, and that didn't happen. And I think a lot of that does have to do with the fact that the pretrial decisions are being made a little bit more intentionally than they may have been before. That being said, I'm sure the sheriff will mention that the population still is starting to slowly increase now a little bit, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But APPR at the end of the day is really it's a culture change, so it's not just about the tool, it's about really changing the whole practice and the culture of the practitioners that are in there. And that's a process. And in fact, we just had a retreat a few weeks ago to talk about, now we're gonna hit the end of the 5-year project with the technical assistance, and we're starting to plan how do we carry this forward into the future. So that planning is going on now. So I think that's the quick snapshot of what's going on, but I'd love to answer questions or.
Could I kind of piggyback on that? So like, what you said there is important, and because you were here when Judge Skinder was describing his take on it, and what I heard him saying kind of was, it was sort of like, the things that are different are not really about what APPR brought tools. It was more about, there are things that could have been done before, but it was more about the culture shift, like getting all the stakeholders to think in a slightly different way and doing things that probably could have been done before, but they just weren't being done because we didn't go through this process and engaging all the stakeholders. So, you know, like, for example, he gave that example of like, okay, so somebody misses court, you know, rather than an automatic slapping of money bail, well, let's be a little more creative and see if there's a way to craft a different kind of condition that might address that.
But what is that? That's what, like, I have a hard time wrestling with, like, okay, you want an alternative to monetary bail that's actually gonna work, but what does that look like?
Well, maybe, I mean, I'm just gonna throw out, maybe the person wasn't under, I know they've got stuff like texting and stuff, they've got, you know, maybe check-ins weren't part of the condition before, but now it is.
So now we're gonna text you to say, please come to court instead of like, take your money?
Yeah, and public defense is actually, or somebody did a presentation that showed that that's actually like kind of crazy effective.
The research, I think, would actually bear out that it's more effective than money bail. Yeah,
Texting people,
Yeah.
please come to
Yeah.
court today.
yeah. Because the population that we're dealing
Who
with
funded the study?
doesn't keep a calendar like you and I.
Yeah, that's what I learned about that too. And the other thing is like, I mean, it's just like how I kind of jokingly in different contexts talk about how like when we were doing the reimbursements, you know, and we were talking about, well, what kind of outreach do we need to do? Well, I can tell you as a former criminal defense lawyer, like I run into my clients at the grocery store. They don't remember me. I run into, I get a new client and I ask them what their criminal history is. They honestly are telling me they don't remember, you know, and then you get the criminal history and they've got like 4 or 5 prior felonies. I mean, the way people deal with things and process information and recall things and keep track of things is not the same amongst, and the population that ends up in the court ends up being folks that, you know, like if I had a court date, I would never miss that court date. It would be in red on my paper calendar that I carry with me everywhere I go. That's not the typical criminal defendant. And getting a text like the day before, that works. I mean, I was surprised when I saw that. Yeah.
Do both text.
Well, they don't need it because if you set monetary bail, they're in jail and we're paying for them to be in jail and they don't have any way to get out. And there's nothing we're really accomplishing by that except pissing away the public's money.
One of the things that we're doing now that's kind of the second piece of work is we are actually looking at, a lot of the APPR is about how we get to that point where the judge is going to make that decision about what the conditions of release are, bail, no bail, and other conditions and so forth. That's really been the focus of the work. Now we're actually focusing on what happens if somebody doesn't follow the conditions. What's the enforcement process? And a couple of months ago, a group of us got together for a day and mapped that all out. Now we're taking that map and starting to look at how do we make that better too, so that this kind of gets to your point. If somebody actually is not following the conditions, right, and either we need to change the conditions or maybe they do just need to be held until their trial. How do we make that process better? And so that's one of the next things that we're working on. And we've already found, I think, some interesting communication gaps where we could help information flow among the different, folks. So for instance, even from my office to law enforcement, so that law enforcement has a better idea of who's following conditions and who's not following conditions, things like that.
I've always been told that it's like 5% of the population's, doing 90% of the criminal behavior. And so you're not, if they're in that crisis and they're doing the criminal behavior, you're not pissing away money by holding them in jail. You're preventing them from victimizing more people. Well, the state intervenes in their life and sets them on a course to help them, to get them the chemical dependency treatment, to get them the opportunity to have some type of productive work, so it's like, if you bring them in and then they're out and they're waiting for a text message and they're still stealing cars and.
Well, that's a different, we're talking about the person, the hypothetical was the person who just missed court, not that they're doing a bunch of criminal behavior.
Yeah.
But if it's just missed court, is that a good decision to place back in jail with no further thought about it? If they're out committing different crimes, that's a different calculus.
Well, and I think it's important to also just to recognize that we are talking about pretrial. So there is, as the judge said, a legal presumption in our court rules and in our statutes that people who are charged with crimes but not convicted are entitled to be released. But the court adds conditions then depending on their risk to the community of committing a violent crime or not appearing for court and so on and so forth. So you kind of start from that place where we got to release them. And that's where the court starts its process. That's a little different than when actually somebody gets convicted of the crime that they're charged with. And now we're talking about sentencing. That's a really different conversation over there, at least from my point of view as a prosecutor.
Okay, cool. Well, let's, any other questions for the prosecutor? This morning, we had on our agenda for next week 2 reclassifications from your department. And we had a little summary sheet, with a paragraph, but I thought we could hear from you kind of the importance of those 2 proposed if you're familiar
You
with
could
them.
if I knew which ones
Okay.
they were.
Which ones
to
are
be
you talking
honest with
about?
you.
I was going from like legal assistant 1 to paralegal 2.
Yeah, one's to a
and then
paralegal,
one
one's a
from
legal assistant to another type,
And then there
higher
was a
level legal assistant.
0.5 employee
Yeah.
to a full-time employee.
Another one was to a from an assistant to a paralegal.
Yeah.
I have it here, one sec. So, the positions were from, legal assistant 1 to legal assistant 2, legal assistant 2 to paralegal 1.
Those two were the composite.
Yeah.
So it's, I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to speak to the specific positions that are there because, you know, we're constantly looking at different things throughout the office. Generally, what's happening is, we have a position and we want to increase the level of the work that they're doing for whatever reason, taking on more complex work. Some of that is driven by the increasing level of complexity around our discovery and everything that we're doing. And so as we're looking at it, we're just constantly evaluating, well, we've got this legal assistant 1, but the job description says that they're topped out at this. But we have a demand for this work to get done. And so that's when we'll bring you a request to move somebody and reclass somebody into a 2 so they can take on more complex work.
I'm gonna just ask, I think the legal assistant 1 to 2, was that within the criminal? Does it say within the
Yeah,
criminal
one of
division?
them had to do with the misdemeanor team.
And that's the
Okay.
easy position,
Okay.
and that's exactly what, is happening. We have a person who is able to, you know, do so much work, but not the next step, right? As far as it, because it's classified as a legal
Like
assistant
preparing
2
a
position.
motion or
So
something.
basically, right now, let's say she can just calendar things. Well, after she's done calendaring, she's been doing that for several years now. She can actually take on more work, but her classification doesn't allow her to take on more work than the calendaring. You know, something that would be more of a routine would, our legal assistant 1 is our entry level. So that's gonna be something really routine, really routine. But if someone's been doing that work for a great deal of time, they become really efficient. But the rest of the staff is like, well, we can't have them schedule arraignments yet because that's not part of the legal assistant 1 classification. I'm just giving you an example, but I'm 99% sure that's the one we're talking about for the LA1 to LA2. I think the LA2 to paralegal is within the public records position, and that is probably just kind of follows with what John was just talking about. Our public records is expanding, and our public records needs more. That's what Sarah Meath has been doing with
Okay,
all of the
okay.
additional higher level work. And same idea, but in the civil realm and the public records realm.
So, we were talking this morning and, in regards to different items and, the budgetary impacts was one of them. And you're able to absorb it this year is what we were let know, but I'm guessing in the future, would you be able to absorb the maintenance levels of this position, of these 2 reclassification requests? And it's not something you have to answer now, like,
Yeah,
know.
but
I-
as we continue this conversation on to next week, just kind of letting you know, for me, those were my main concerns, right, were the budgetary impacts that these 2 reclassifications have, and of course, these 2 positions are not going to make or break the bank, but as we're thinking about different positions that are coming up for reclassification and us just going through one, you know, that's, I think, just a question that I would like to know from your office. Is that something that?
Well,
Was that part of your work session this morning?
Yeah, because they're proposed for consent agenda items for the 18th.
I see.
So this was
Okay.
first review this morning.
Okay.
One thing that we try to do, though, is to be budget conscious by doing this option rather than an add of a new position, which is going to be a much more significant budget implication. And so we always are looking at that, and that's why I think it's great when we have certainly an employee in that becomes efficient enough that can take on additional, rather than saying, oh, we need a 0.5 of a LA2 because we've got this person doing an LA1 job and they're not able to bring on this additional workload.
And I like to hear that stuff because honestly, there's different motivations for reclasses, you know? Sometimes someone's been doing work, like we're trying to catch it, we're trying to almost like shore up the HR side, like
Gotcha.
they've already been doing this thing and like it really needs to be representative of what they're doing. Other times it's like, kind of almost like a reward promotion. I can't promote them in this way, so this is a way for me to give someone keep them retention issue. What you're describing is really a greater efficient, like more work's gonna get done of a type that's not able to, so I see that, that's kind of a third reason for doing it, and I like to hear those kind of, what's the motivation here?
We do a lot of, we're constantly trying to create opportunities for professional growth for people, so sometimes we have openings and people can move up into an opening. Other times, we're stable enough, that doesn't exist, but we've got this person here who is able to take on more complex work. And then that might be the time that we go, look for a reclass if that's a need that we have.
Yeah, and it's a little different for both the criminal and the civil positions right now. Same general idea, but the paralegal in public records, that's because the work is becoming more complex and that type of thing. The position in the criminal division is because of the volume and needing the additional volume for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards?
I guess my concern on that whole thing is we're concerned about budgetary issues. But I don't think it's any of our business to try to tell you how to run your shop and make those kind of adjustments, in my estimation. So I just throw that out because I've been a separately elected individual myself that didn't appreciate that micromanagement that oftentimes got in the way. So,
Well, and just to say this quite bluntly, and this is not disrespectful, meant to be disrespectful in any way, shape, or form, but you don't have the time to micromanage my shop or anybody else's, because it's full-time for me and Christie, right? And
that's why I don't think we ought to be in it, so.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, my question, my inquiry into the motivation is purely on trying to make the budgetary discussion. I don't have any doubt. I would never, if the money were there, I would like, there was another reclass where it was like gonna be a diminution of thing, is like, okay, well then, that doesn't affect my authority. So I'm not gonna question that the director, has the need and the request. So, just to clarify.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to micromanage.
No, it was not taken that way, so yes. That's fine.
Okay, other questions for the prosecuting attorney team? All right, thank you guys for your
Nice to
time.
see you all.
Thank you.
Great.
And I believe these aren't consent, though. These are department items now.
They were taken off for consent. Weren't they?
Yeah,
I don't,
they were.
They weren't taken off for consent.
they were
We're
taken off.
gonna bring back more information.
We're gonna get more information.
Yeah.
I think,
E was left on, F, G, and H were taken off to come back later.
Something like that.
Just to clarify, Commissioner Mejia requested that E, F, and H, or G, come off consent onto department item. And that means it's absolutely done. We weren't trying to take them off the agenda.
Item E was left on the consent agenda.
Yep.
Item F, G, and H were moved to department items.
Correct.
oh,
Got it.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yep. All right, sheriff's up. Can I see the sheriff's team? Sheriff in there.
I'll be here.
Doing, Sheriff?
Good afternoon, Chair, Board, thanks for having me. It's pretty busy at the Sheriff's Office right now, a couple of things I'll touch on. I'll try and go in order of some things. I'm also on the APPR committee. The one thing that I brought up to them a number of times throughout this whole thing, right, pretrial has been a hot topic in the community about releasing people. And one of the big things I've always brought up in those meetings is, how are we measuring success? Because if we show a study that says, hey, we're releasing more people into the community and simultaneously crime is going up, is that a measure of success? And one of the biggest concerns I had was that, we're releasing, these people and they're coming back to court. And one of my big concerns was, well, yeah, but I'm taking 5 to 10 eludings a night in our county. And how do we know that that's not our 5 people who got released? So with the law changing, I feel a little bit more confident in the system. Not that we're going to catch all of them, but at least when there's people who are being released after they've stolen a car and then we go out there, and now we can actually chase a car at 2 a.m. and get that person back into custody. We can say, here's your guy who was supposed to be he checked in for court, but he's still stealing cars. So I do feel a little bit better about that process now, because before it was like, well, they're showing up for their court date, and I'm like, well, yeah, but auto theft is up like 60%. So going kind of on what Commissioner Fournier said, if it's this small segment of the population, then there's nothing actually to say that they're not still not stealing cars. So I do feel a little bit better about that now, but the law has changed. I've been bringing that up since day one, is that we're having so many people flee and we don't know who they are, that we don't really know if they're complying or not. So I feel a little bit more confident in that. As far as the jail, one of the big things we're doing right now, my chief is over at a conference. We're working with risk management, and this is really early in the preliminary phase. We're getting ready to meet with the company, but they met with a vendor who sells a product, which are wristbands for inmates when they get checked into the jail, and it monitors their heartbeat and sends an emergency notification if the heartbeat obviously dips below a certain beats per minute. And so right now, I think the cost breakdown roughly. Risk management said they'd be willing to put like $25,000 towards it, is what I was told, which was only going to get us like 7 bracelets. But that's 7 that we don't have currently. So we're looking into that technology, which to me, we have the body scanner. We don't let inmates have mail anymore. There's no direct visitation. It's all video visitation. We have a narcotics dog. We have the fentanyl. This is just one more layer of protection to make sure that no one in our jail dies for any reason, whether it's a medical issue that they were going to have no matter what, an overdose, an assault, anything like that. Commissioner.
Thank you. I know this has been a topic of great concern, especially with the overdose deaths that have happened in the jail previously. I don't remember the first year you had just taken office and, it was kind of one of the first things on your plate. It was just this. And so I guess, and I know this will be probably once you find out more information, you're going to bring it in front of the board, but I'm wondering with just having 7 bracelets available, it's like, how are you going to choose who?
Yeah, and that's the first thing. That's the first thing I came up with when they told us we would only have money for 7, and I'm like, well, we need to immediately triage our policy and procedure to figure out how are we going to choose who gets the 7 bracelets? Then is it, is it going to come back and say, well, you're racist, you're socioeconomic, whatever it is, right? We need to have some sort of policy. And I think the easiest way to do that, honestly, is to leave it up to our charge nurses to help us determine who's most at risk. We have 24-hour medical now that the county pays for. They're getting screened when they come in. And so people who, first of all, have previously overdosed in our jail might be a good place to start. But also individuals who are coming in with drug charges or things like that are probably going to be where we start. But ultimately, I need to learn more about the actual product and how it's billed. I'm sure there's a startup cost, and then pretty confident there's probably an ongoing cost. So we need to figure out what that is and whether or not it's a good investment for the county. But based on what I've heard so far, it seems like it probably would be, at least a trial. Yes?
Is Sherry involved in kind of?
She will be. Yeah, we're going to get our initial brief from the company because, 25,000 divided by 7, I mean, that's a decent chunk per bracelet. And you figure we've got almost 300 inmates inside of our jail. So we need to figure that piece out to figure out what we're going to do there. But as soon as we decide yes or no to move forward on that, we'll immediately bring legal and IT in that way. Give you guys a full picture.
I guess for those watching, I just want to point out, this is in any jail, not just in Thurston County Jail.
Oh, the overdose issues?
Yeah, the whole issue of deaths in jails.
Yeah, and our overdoses have gone down since we implemented last year's technology, so. Commissioner, do you have a question?
No,
okay.
thank you.
So that's the jail right now. Currently, there's 292 inmates in our jail. Obviously, we have the lateral incentive package that we're trying to get passed, which is really important. The big thing that we're seeing right now, unfortunately, is that we ran out of candidates on the correction side. So for the first time, our actual background unit is moving faster than people are applying. So you figure about 1 out of every 12-ish corrections deputies who apply, people who apply actually pass and get hired. So on a list of 30 people, you're hoping to get 2 or 3. And so for the first time, we actually have background investigators twiddling their thumbs on the corrections side. We are hiring as fast as we can on that side. There's just a lack of interest, generally speaking. So we've had a number of meetings with our recruiting division to try and figure out how we can boost that number up and try to get people interested in a career field of corrections. On the corrections side, we are sitting at, let me pull it up for you here, our current vacancies in the jail. We are sitting at 17 corrections deputy vacancies, so we're continuing to chip down at it. We do have a retirement at the end of the month, but we also have a couple more corrections deputies coming on who have completed that process. And in the Field Operations Bureau, we are down to 5 vacancies for patrol, and we have, I believe, 5 lateral applicants still in the pool. I swear one in on the 16th. I swear another lateral in on July 1st, and we're hoping for 2 more on July 16th, I think is what it was. So, and then another one down the road. So right now, what we've been doing to try and make sure that we hit the ground running with the public safety tax positions is that anyone who's not currently a police officer and applies, we're still doing backgrounds on them off to the side. And right now, we're filling all of our general fund vacancies up with those laterals so we can get them done and trained up this year. And then when the new positions start to trickle in August, we will already have started to hit the ground running, and their backgrounds are done, they're hired, we're sending them off to the academy kind of thing. So, and then as laterals continue to apply, then obviously we can plug them in. But yeah, once we get our general fund deputies filled, we then have the gauntlet of 27 more deputy sheriffs to fill over the next 18 months. So we're gonna keep hiring, and it's my opinion that by this time next year, the sheriff's office will be the best place to work as far as law enforcement in the entire state. So I truly believe we're on that path.
Real quick,
Yeah.
what was you had a magic number on correction vacancies for options to open?
7 away, yeah. So once we get down to 15, which is coming up, we're gonna start having conversations about cameras. Cause like I said, we've cannibalized the options building to keep the main jail running. And I know the jail is currently in the purchase phase of the new camera project. So the only thing that's going to keep the options building up from running when we have 10 vacancies is the cameras. So we're working on that as well, and we'll let the jail team figure that piece out. But yeah, I'm excited to get options open. We have 292 people in our jail. It's creeping up, and we want to get options open so that people on CDP and who are eligible can get out of that jail facility and keep their employment. Because to me, I feel like being employed is a pretty big deal to someone who's trying not to recidivate. Staying employed and having that financial income and all those things that help people provide for their families and whatnot. So I believe in the work release program, and I want to get it back up and running. Great. For patrol, we, like I said, are sitting at the 5 vacancies in support staff. We have no vacancies. So you'll remember they settled their contract last year for all of our support staff, and ironically now we have 0 vacancies in that bureau. So all of our civilian support staff are hired and full. So just a thank you, I suppose, to the commissioners for hearing us out and giving them a little bit of a pay bump, because I think it mattered. And yeah, they do really important work for us and some really high liability work between PDR, firearms, warrants, civil, evidence. We've got bureau staff assistants across all of our bureaus. And so they do really important work, and I felt like it was important they got fairly compensated for that. And now we've retained those positions, which is nice. Let's see, we have the dog camera grant that's coming before you guys. We are also going through contract negotiations right now, which are pretty busy. Obviously, the new law for the pursuit stuff has changed. That policy went into effect. And so, again, the deputies were ready and waiting. We crafted that policy in partnership with the prosecutor's office. And then we have the items purchased for that pursuit technology stuff. On top of that, risk management, I think, is giving us another $41,000 to buy more of them. But we have to come back before you guys to get another
this morning.
Yeah, another approval. And then depending on what happens with this grant as well, then we'll have to come back a third time for the same item.
Between the first round of Grappler and the Star Chase, which one are you going to have in hand first?
Star Chase.
And when do you think you'll have those?
August. Yeah, we think installed and trained in August. I think we had like 6 or 7 of those. And that's just because Star Chase is also being purchased by a number of other agencies up in the area. So they said, just let us know. And there's no shipping costs either because they'll be here. So they'll be able to deliver without any shipping costs, it sounds like. The grappler, we're gonna order some more of those with this money here because we have some Chevy Tahoes that are waiting at the shops to be installed or finished for new patrol cars. So it just made sense to have those installed as they roll out instead of taking current vehicles off the fleet and deadlining those. So
There's training involved with those, I would imagine.
yeah, there's gonna be training involved with both of them. Yeah, the grappler, I think is a little more, it's gonna take a little more skill, if you will. It's more like the pit where you've gotta get close enough to get in and get the net tied up, whereas Star Chase, you can be a little bit further back, I think. But I also think the grappler, in all honesty, is gonna be more effective of like making sure we stop someone right away. There's not really any surviving the grappler as far as the mechanics of the vehicle. It gets all tangled up and stops the car. So that's those devices. If we get the grants, which because we have our new public safety tax positions, the size of our agency increase, which means we're actually eligible for more money this year through the grant process. I think it's up to $150,000 now. So we've put in for that grant, and we'll hear back probably by the end of summer as to whether or not we get that. But so that's that piece. You'll see deputies out on the boats this summer. We've got our boat and our jet skis out. They've already started going out and making contacts on the waterways. The big thing for me right now is that we're entering what the State Patrol has dubbed as the 90 dangerous days of summertime, where fatal crashes increase exponentially. So we're trying to get our traffic unit up and going, which they've been out doing a bunch of traffic stops and whatnot, but the DUI stuff is what scares me a lot in this county. You know, your likelihood of being shot to death or having your home, invaded or anything like that is so comparatively low to going to the grocery store and not coming back home because a missile collided with your car. So we'll keep trying to crack down on the DUI stuff and lower those numbers. Each year since 2000, every year traffic fatalities have gone up a little bit, but in 2021 they really started ramping up.
Can I ask on that? So has there been I think John and I talked about this, has there been a reduction of like state enforcement of, they had Target Zero teams, and I used to see them all the time, and I don't see them as much, just anecdotally.
No, still going. Yeah.
Are they doing the same amount of enforcement?
I think so. Yeah.
You just think there's
John,
more?
I believe that,
More drunk driving happening?
I think there's more impaired, and the big difference for me, I think I've seen a lot more drug DUI stuff going on. When I first got into the job, it was a ton of alcohol DUI. And you'd find someone slumped over the wheel using heroin, right? And it's more of a physical control. But just a lot of drug DUI stuff and they're also oftentimes the ones who are fleeing traffic stops and things like that. So, it's one of those things where the DUI stuff is pretty concerning to me. And half of our fatal collisions statewide every year are drug or are DUI induced. So, if you could stop drunk driving today, you'd get rid of half of our fatal collisions in our state. So it's a pretty significant number.
When you say drunk driving, are you combining
all types of DUI?
Okay, so
prescription,
maybe they're on heroin or fentanyl or
alcohol. Yep, all. So, I can ramble on for quite some time, but right now, financial looks good. I know we still have some variancy. Our double overtime in the jail, that MOU is still significantly underspent. I think we budgeted $500,000 for 6 months, and I think we just crested $200,000. So the double overtime MOU in the jail, I think objectively is working since we've cut our vacancies from 32 down to 17 in a matter of 6 months. So that's a pretty good mark. The background unit is working extremely hard. Like I said, we got 14 background investigators. Just a quick update for you. So far, year to date, we've hired 6 lateral deputy sheriffs. Last year, we hired 0. We have hired 12 patrol deputies. This same time last year, or all of last year total, we hired 15. So halfway through this year, we've almost hired as many as we hired in 2023 alone. And then in corrections, this year we have hired 12 through, June now. For the entirety of last year, we hired 8. So we are already surpassed last year's corrections deputies hiring. And so, yeah, I would say pretty objectively that the bonuses are working, the incentive is working, and I don't think we can tie it to any one thing. I think there's a number of things that have made that entire package very enticing to people. Being able to come in at top step when you have the pay and experience to demand it, which is something we couldn't do before. Obviously, the money bonus, I think, is a part of it. Also, front loading some sick leave for people. If you're gonna make that jump in your career and give up everything you've got, it would kind of suck to get sick and then take unpaid leave if you're a sole provider for your family. So I think that was a big deal. Our deputies are recruiting pretty hard to get that 40-hour bank leave. I appreciate the county manager for working with us on a hiccup that we had about a deputy who successfully recruited someone over, but they didn't put it on the application, so they weren't gonna get the hours. So we were able to work past that and make sure the employee was fairly compensated for that good recruiting that we got out of Seattle PD. So yeah, right now, I mean, I think to date, we've had 24 lateral deputies apply. A number of them have been DQ'd for different reasons. We had one apply who is getting ready to be federally indicted for some crimes. So we were able to detect that and succinctly remove him off of our list. But nonetheless, to see the application flow come through that we haven't had in quite some time is pretty promising to me. So like I said earlier, I'm pretty confident this is going to be the best police department to work for in the entire state this time next year.
How are we doing on pursuit? It's been, what, got a week now or less than a week?
We had one person run, which is exactly what we wanted. We wanted people to not run. We wanted them to get pulled over and take.
What was a week prior to that typical? There were.
Oh, you'd usually see about 5 to 10 cars flee a night. And the one that we
got one.
Yeah, we've had one for no front plate. Guy ran and then got arrested for DUI, eluding. Had a bunch of the metal lined bags used for shoplifting to defeat metal detectors in the car. So, yeah, so that person was arrested. That's the only one we've had flee so far. We've had some street bikes, but, you know, with street bikes, it's kind of like, all right, well, you know, gravity will catch up to you eventually. And so, yeah, we've had one vehicle flee since the law took place, which is what we wanted. We wanted people to stop running and going 100 miles an hour down the road in a 40 because their license is suspended or because, you know, they shoplifted or whatever. We'd prefer you just pull over. Most of the time, you don't even go to jail. You get a court summons.
One guy had a good reason, it sounded like.
That guy had a good, you know, and that's what people, you always have to figure people are going to weigh the risk, right? And say, well, I'm pretty high and I got a bunch of stolen mail and stuff in my car. I'm going to risk it. But, you know, really what we want is for people to just comply and pull over. And that's been the whole complaint about that law is that we just saw so many people become missiles going down the roadway that really before the law, most of those people likely would have just pulled over and been like, yeah, I don't want to run. I don't want to catch the felony for it, right? I guess I'll deal with my suspended license or whatever it is. So, yeah, so far we've seen pretty strict compliance. People are going to continue to run. I'm not saying that that's not going to be the case. And deputies will be required to still weigh the risk and reward.
Commissioner Klaus, saw your hand.
Yeah, I was wondering if your new pursuit policy is available on your website?
It's not available on our website. We just got done with it, but we can provide it to you.
Okay, I had a constituent ask about that. That's why I asked, because someone was curious about just policies and procedures in general.
Yeah.
And if they could access them on your website or if they would have to do like a public records request.
Right now, you have to do a public records request. We don't have anywhere on our website. So yeah, they just have to do a public records request so we can get them all the documents.
Okay.
I mean, they'll probably get it back almost same day. It's a pretty easy document to scan and send off to anyone, so.
Okay.
In the future, we can certainly do that. That reminds me, we're also working on 2 different dashboards. The first is a use of force dashboard. It's public, but it's also for staff to look at as well, which measures all the different use of force incidents from 2023. And so our crime analyst has been funneling all of that data into a public-facing dashboard where people can not just look at the types of force, but they can also see the heat maps of where force is most likely to be used. Of course, looking at the map, it's the Lacey area where most of our crime occurs. So you can look at the heat map and see that the crime is also pretty consistent where most of deputy use of force is occurring as well. So the second one that we're working on that we're in the process of is our pursuit dashboard. So we're also looking at creating a dashboard that shows where pursuits are occurring, how they're ending, all those kinds of things as well, so that the public can see our pursuit dashboard. And then the last piece of that will be probably like a vacancy dashboard, so that any member of the public can go look and see by bureau how many vacancies the sheriff's office has. So if you're interested in applying with us and you don't know if we're full, you can go right to our website and say, oh, they still have 3 vacancies in the patrol division, and we'll update that every week so that people have up-to-date information. They can apply for those vacancies. So, and it'll also be helpful, I think, for our own staff. We're trying to gauge where the sheriff's office is and don't just want to tune into a commissioner briefing, right? They want to know, so.
You made reference to crime analyst.
Yes.
And I remember we funded that last year.
No, well, no, the crime analyst is actually, it predates me. The crime analyst is from 2000, Robin, you were in your position, 2018 or 19 maybe?
Sounds about right, 17 or 18, it's been.
However, it was unfilled.
Oh, okay.
It's been an unfilled position that we just filled last year.
Okay, so how is that, what's your take on how that's been working out?
It's good. They're obviously, the crime analysts, the benefit for me at least is their ability, and they're still getting their feet wet and meeting with all the other crime analysts because most of the agencies here have them. But their ability to bring data to the table as opposed to just like, well, I feel like, it kind of changes the conversation a little bit. And so their ability to do that, they've also been able to crank out like some hot spots for DUI collisions at intersections and things like that. So our traffic team will be able to pull that data when they're out doing emphasis and choosing where they want to park and do radar or whatever it is. The ability to say like, oh, well, you know, Bald Hill and Vale Road is a bad one. So we're going to sit there and even if you're just making a presence of yourself, you can't make a presence everywhere, but we can choose where the worst areas are to do that. So I'm a firm believer in the crime analyst stuff and the data and being able to make a statement, but then also say, hey, does that actually check out? With what we're seeing in terms of numbers. So I actually think that position's going to compound over the next few years and become better and more efficient as time goes on, especially as we start looking at our new report writing system and all these different things that are coming in. So, sir.
I'm on the state jail modernization task force, and one of the things that I brought up, and I'm thinking might be a good recommendation, I want your opinion on this. There's like no bridge program to go from being a DOC corrections officer to a deputy corrections officer in your jail, and having like the CJTC have some type of bridge training to make that able. Is that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also think that there's just, you know, on the patrol side, you see like the equivalency and all these different things where like someone from out of state can come over here and take a 2-week course.
It doesn't exist from the state, and this DOC has thousands of correctional officers that are in that industry. Is there any, I mean, I can't imagine there's much difference in like the training curriculum. I mean, there's no fundamental difference between those two.
Yeah,
things,
I haven't been
right?
through either one of them, but I do know that we've hired DOC correctional officers. It's just they have to go through the process like they don't have any experience.
All over again.
Yeah. So I would like to see some bridge there, even if it's a 2-week equivalency, that someone from DOC or someone from out of state could attend. Because the whole state has a shortage of corrections officers everywhere.
Yeah.
We're ironically with 17 vacancies, because we have the options program, which is optional. We're actually sitting better than most of our neighboring jails. Most of our neighboring jails are on complete booking restrictions, cannot accept people who don't commit a felony. We're the only one I know of in this region who's fully open. But that's because the county's invested in like the work release program. So when we suspended it, we were able to take those 9 deputies and move them to the main jail, and vice versa. So, yeah, I would like to see some sort of transitional, especially when you talk about all the shortages we have for corrections deputies, but then we can't even, you know, do the easy stuff right. We can't take out-of-state corrections laterals if they don't have that CJTC cert. Same thing for DOC. It seems silly to me that someone can be a prison guard for 20 years and deal with like really, really rough conditions, and then they can come to a county jail where things are even, I would argue, sometimes lighter, right? A lot of the people aren't convicted murderers. But they can't transfer that experience without going through the whole process over again. The big difference between us and DOC, however, is the background process. So we've got the polygraph.
There's no negating that.
Yeah, so they still have to pass the background, but as far as leaning on their experience, it seems reasonable to me.
Okay. Who you represent? Like, what's your seat on that?
Western Washington.
Counties?
Yeah.
like through Wausau.
Yeah.
Another big piece that we're working on right now is trying to transition to Axon body cameras. We are still waiting on the quote from Axon. It is not going to be cheap. I can already tell you that. Axon is it's the AAA premier company in the world of body camera technology. But one of the things that does keep me up at night is knowing that our body cameras do not have the capability. They have the capability, just for not very long, to pre-record 30 seconds. So if I'm out on patrol and someone runs up to me and slaps me in the face as hard as they can, and I'm like, oh wow, after I come to, I'm like, I should turn my body camera on before I react. It records from the time I touch my body camera forward. So it's not gonna capture the fact that I got a Donald Duck handprint on my hand, on my face. It's just gonna show me tase the person and tackle them onto the ground and take them into custody. Huge problem, huge problem. The body cameras can do it. The problem is the battery lasts about 2 hours. And so what we kept seeing is that deputies are, and it's the silliest, it's so unpractical, that your body camera is always recording, but it's killing the battery on these cheaper cameras. And then halfway, not even halfway through the shift, a quarter of the way through the shift, they've got to take it off and throw it in the charger in their car. And then a hot call comes out and they run off without their camera. And we felt like that was even worse than just turning the feature off. So at least the cameras make it almost all the way through our shift. So that, and then also the issue that we're talking about with prosecution and defense, and the ability to use evidence.com, where all of the body camera footage and dash cam footage is stored up in a cloud, instead of downloading every single video onto a county server over and over and over again. So that'll probably end up being not a joint proposal, because I think they're light years ahead of us in this process. However, I know Axon was looking at a bundled discount for all the different products that we're looking at going through. The other piece of it is that all of our tasers are really old now, and they're starting to go a little defective. And that's also, we have the money to buy new tasers, but if we have the ability to go into this leased program instead of the ER&R program, we obviously don't want to go buy tasers and then jump onto this full package and then waste a bunch of money. So what we're trying to do right now, looking at our public safety tax budget and everything, is figure out, one, how much the body camera is going to cost for 115 FTEs, because that's about how many total we'll have by the time PSST is done. And then on top of that, figure out all the different things we need. And then I think IT is on board. IT is like, let's get this done tomorrow, because they're seeing the headache that's going on. So once we get all that stuff figured out, then we'll start a work group here and start actually discussing some of the issues and how we can overcome that.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's no shortage of busy here at the sheriff's office. I think today they're actually getting ready to post the new canine positions. So we'll have deputies applying for canine. We'll be in the process of purchasing a couple dogs and starting to get that stuff up and going. Another big thing is vehicles. So I think you guys will have another request coming forward to you for vehicle stuff, because we have a lot of cars to buy over the next 18 months. And we aren't always getting that guarantee. But the county shops, once again, doing a good job, found, I think, 5 or 8 patrol vehicles sitting on a lot just down the road. So instead of waiting for Ford to ship cars, we can just go pick them up. So, and that's what we did last year as well. So trying to find cars immediately to patch things up. One of the downfalls of hiring laterals is that when they get hired, they're ready for their car. So no longer is it a problem that we can kick down the road of like, oh, we'll just wait for them to graduate the academy. We have exactly how many cars we need right now. If even one transmission blew up, we would have people sharing cars and not have enough. So you'll probably hear that coming from Bruce. So
NACO last year, we saw really cool electric police cars.
I would totally be down to do some electrification of the fleet. Our patrol division would never be able to at this point, not with the technology, because they need to drive 300 miles and then fill up in 30 seconds and drive another 300 miles. However, our detectives...
Take them home.
And they take them home.
And we'd have them plugging into their home to recharge, which...
Yeah, the detective side of things would be a potential if we got some EVs, because they kind of putt around the county and then take them home. We just have to figure out through the CBA, the contract of how do they get reimbursed for the charging time at their house. So and the installation of whatever car charger kind of thing. But it is a possibility that I'm willing to explore down the road, so.
I have a question. Another constituent question came in regarding the helicopter, and I was wondering where we're at with that. Is that kind of on pause while you have all of these other moving pieces, or will that be coming back before us again soon?
Well, it's still on the wait list. So until we actually hear from the federal government that, hey, we have a helicopter, it's just kind of sitting on it's been on a wait list. I think we've been on that list for 3 or 4 years now.
Okay.
So it's probably getting closer, but once we actually hear that, hey, there's a helicopter available for you, then we'll start moving forward on that. So yeah, until then, it'll just kind of be something that sits and waits. There's not a whole lot of work to be done quite yet, because I don't want to do a whole bunch of work for something that we don't know is coming.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, and then during those next steps, like, there's just a couple like finer details that I don't think we have time to get into today, but people asking about like drones compared to a helicopter for what you're using it for. So I imagine we'll have another work session where you can explain that, and
Yeah.
we'll have a chance to ask any final questions.
Yeah, and the big thing, kind of like EV, is just where drone technology is at. I think if we went and got like an MH1 Predator from the military, that would suffice the needs of what we're looking for.
Probably
But
not a good
most
idea.
people probably don't want the sheriff's office to own a Reaper. So the big thing is that is just like a gas car. The drones, just you couldn't do a lot of what we're asking a helicopter to do, which is search vast areas in a short period of time with FLIR on top of that. I did see there's a couple agencies down in California that are beta testing this new drone system, but I can already tell you it's really expensive, and it's for smaller areas. But what they do is they've got all these, they look like little football stadiums, and they open up with a drone inside of it, and it's all CAD related. So when 911 calls come out, these drones with red and blue lights on them fly up to the location of the 911 call.
That scares me.
And they're clearing out like suspicious people, for instance, with those. Like the drone will fly up there, and there's an operator on the other side who's watching and says, oh, the guy doesn't have a baseball bat, he's got a umbrella, and he's just walking down the street, they'll clear the call out. So it's all really cool, but the total flight time for the drone, and these are like the top tier drones you can get, is like 40 minutes. So you can see, we can get a helicopter up in the air and fly it, and cover 100 square miles in 4 hours before having to refuel, whereas the drone can go about 45 minutes and cover.
You have drones already, right?
We do, yeah, and we have
Just
drones.
for different things.
Yep. Yeah, we use drones a lot for reconstruction of collisions. So they'll go up and take aerial photos of collisions to get skid marks on the roadway and total site plans of the collisions. We've used drones for search and rescue. We've tried to use drones for some canine tracking stuff, but again, part of the problem is most of it is line of sight. So as far as you can see the drone, you can connect it, but at some point in time, the operator has to start walking toward the target as well for it to actually keep that connectivity so your drone doesn't crash into the ground. So we do have drones. They're also very expensive. I think our most expensive drone at one point in time was like $45,000. So they're not much cheaper. And that one I think is already obsolete and needing to be placed. So
The helicopter contract was like $10,000 a year.
Yeah, that was for the insurance. And then the proposal for the fuel was to split it, I think 50-50, 50,000 to our boater fund and 50,000 to general fund to cover anything that wasn't under a marine response type thing. So yeah, somewhere in that area. But again, we have a lot of finer details to go over with the helicopter program. My biggest thing for the helicopters, I wanted to put it out there because we started getting a lot of questions from our proposal. So I wanted to clarify, a lot of people were like, why are we going to go spend $6.8 million on a new Bell helicopter when you don't have enough deputies? And that would be a valid point, but we're not going to spend $6.8 million on a helicopter. So I just want to clear some of those things up. So.
Yeah, I was getting a lot of questions too, but it turned out that the questions I was getting were not people that saw our presentation. They were people that read something in the Jolt, I believe.
Yes.
And which I didn't read it, but apparently it just had completely different information than what you presented. So
Yeah.
I was not able to answer the questions because they were coming with things that wasn't what we were told. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, the Jolt headline was because during that presentation, I also gave you guys a presentation on Star Chase and the Grappler unit. So I think the Jolt headline was like the sheriff wants a helicopter and like Batman toys for the sheriff's office. And I was like, well, kind of, but not quite. And so, yeah, they made me sound like the Dark Knight. Yeah, the big thing with the helicopter is that we wouldn't even be considering it if it weren't cost effective. And we didn't have if Northwest wasn't willing to get involved in this, it wouldn't even be a conversation, so.
Okay, anything else for the sheriff? There's a lot. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, guys.
All right, that's the end of our agenda, so we're adjourned. We got Board of Health, 3:45.